Oops, I did it again, said the DNC after they made South Carolina the first state in the lineup for the 2028 Democratic Presidential Primaries. Now, they released the list on Friday, July 24th, and this had caused some tension within the party. Now, for some brief context for those who may remember, in 2008, Barack Obama, he had won the state, and by that point, it wasn't clear if he could win. So it wasn't until after he'd won the South Carolina primary that Rep. Jim Clyburn then endorsed Barack Obama. Then in 2016, Hillary Clinton, from her long-standing history in Democratic politics, she had connections in the South, and she had carried the state handedly. Then in 2020, we saw President Biden win the state as well, even though he was underwater in the previous New Hampshire and Iowa primary and caucus. So interestingly enough, what it is safe to say is that South Carolina does have a history of, at least in recent history, lending itself to supporting a more moderate establishment candidate. Now, with Barack Obama being the exception in 2008, who is to say that a red conservative state like South Carolina, with a large black population, with an open primary between Democrats and independents also being able to participate in the presidential primary, it will be interesting to see how the base supports a new candidate come 2028. But progressives have concerns. We know that the DNC already ensured that in 2020, South Carolina would be one of the earlier states, because we knew Jim Clyburn already was going to be supporting President Biden, or at the time, Vice President Biden. That being said, it does kind of seem like the DNC is trying to, promote their desired outcome in this lineup. Now, fortunately, it's not official. This has only been created by the Rules and Bylaws Committee of the DNC. It will then have to go to a full vote with the full lineup in August. So we have about a month until we hear if this is official and if there's any changes after that. But again, seeing how progressives have already been thwarted by the establishment, we just saw what's happening in Michigan, where the establishment is coming out in full support for Haley Stevens, right? It makes us wonder, how much, influence are they trying to really put in the Democratic primary? A true democracy would really be like, all right, kids, play it out, see who wins, and that would be fine. But because we know the establishment is, really concerned with maintaining the status quo, they don't want change, because that would then upset the corporate donors who rely on this corporate system of pay to play. So with that said, we'll see how this influences the 2028 presidential campaign. There is a chance that former Vice President Kamala Harris would be the favored candidate as it stands today. Now, potential contenders also include California Governor Gavin Newsom, former Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, and also Congressional Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So because of that, we know that these are potential contenders who will have to be vying for the trust and support of voters in South Carolina. But not to worry, they released the full lineup, and there is a good mix of diverse populations throughout the country. So also in the lineup, of course, South Carolina starts their primary and kicks off the season on January 22nd, 2028. Then we have Nevada on February 1st, New Hampshire on February 8th, then we have New Mexico on February 15th, and then Michigan on February 22nd, and last but not least, the state of Virginia on February 29th. And this is good, where we know that some of the other states have usually been later in the lineup, so giving them some visibility, bringing them to the front, I think is a good thing, especially for a swing state like Michigan and a relatively blue-ish state like Virginia. So lo and behold, we need to do the organizing work now in these states. So for all the Democratic Socialist chapters in those states, for all the progressive groups in those states, we need to be staying connected and talking to the voters about progressive issues. So by the time 2028 comes, our progressive candidate will be very much aligned to the needs of the voters and the environment that we will create by talking about these issues by then.